I'm Seth Frey, a cognitive scientist at UC Davis, and like this title, this talk has a lot of stuff crammed into a very tiny amount of space. I'll present three very different projects using large game-like datasets, naturalistic observational datasets in games, to open up new questions in cognitive scientists. With this speed run through so many different projects, the goal is a little less to inform by each one than to dazzle and give a sense of the opportunity and creativity available when we go this direction, when we use this kind of data to do cognitive science. Why games? These are engineered social systems, and because engineering is hard, because it's built around simplicity, games offer a simplified environment, agents with clear goals, high motivation. We get lots of data, many trials, often selection on performance, and often a societal unit of analysis, a group unit of analysis rather than an individual unit of analysis, which opens up entirely new kinds of questions. We're going to see some information processing insights gained from poker, some different information processing insights gained from NBA basketball, and for something really different, some governance insights gleaned from Minecraft, the video game. Starting off with poker. So poker is a card game. It's a game of skill and chance. It's worth a lot of money. A lot of people play it. It's very popular. And I'm going to zoom right into a puzzle about poker. You want to make money, and so you should use every signal I'm providing to make money. Accepting this model of the poker player here, they take two inputs, your own cards and my signal to you about how strong my cards are, and you use that information to produce one output, your own signal of how strong your cards are, which may or may not have any relationship to actual hand strength. So you should use all information you can from me to make money, but if you're doing that, then not only do I see one arrow coming out of your black box, I see one arrow going in your black box. I can start to learn it, learn your algorithm, learn your strategy. So there's a profitability, predictability trade-off that poker players have to navigate. How do they do it? Using lots of data, this is the result. We decomposed using a method called partial information decomposition, a nice little bit of information theory that was developed about a decade ago. We can decompose the information about the output contained in the input due to the inputs, and we can into four categories. So your wagers, the output, the behavior, to some extent can be explained uniquely by one of the inputs, uniquely by another. There's some amount of the information in the output that's explainable redundantly from either input. And then there's this fourth category. It's information contained in the output that doesn't come from either input alone, but their interaction. It's almost, think of it as a nonlinear interaction term we're able to compute. And the result is that a greater proportion of expert behavior, profitable player behavior, is in the synergistic component. Now, the mundane interpretation of that is that, okay, experts are better at processing information, at combining multiple sources of input to have good behavior. But there's an additional insight or an additional consequence of this synergy. Without synergy, your output is in some sense a sum of of information from your inputs. So you don't need to know I don't need to know your cards to partly reverse engineer your strategy. But in a synergistic context, it's necessary, because there's this interaction component, it's necessary to learn both inputs and the output, to see all three parts in order to reverse engineer the strategy. This is sort of like encryption. One interpretation is that experts encrypt their strategy with the information contained in their private cards. And what this lets them do is use public information without becoming more predictable. They can have their cake and eat it too. So that's for poker. What's the implication for cognitive scientists? Well, in cognitive science, we sort of accept there's different stages, more or less. There's the perception stage, then there's information processing stage that gathers that into numbers that we can make decisions over. those are treated as separate. But if I can process information in a way that has strategic content that affects what people know about me, then we can break up the difference in that process and blur the lines a little bit, make the information processing stage part of the decision making process. In a word, information processing doesn't just process information. That was one project. Now we'll do a very different kind of question and a very different domain. So we got lots of basketball data, and I want to know what are the cognitive limits on human teamwork. So Herbert Simon gives us this perspective. In one way of putting it is organizations are the shadow cast by human cognitive limits, that we can understand organizations in terms of bounded rationality and human limits. The organizations let us do more than any individual can do by helping us work around our limits. From that direction, if we understand human cognitive bounds, we gain insight into the constraints on team structure and how to build teams and build better teamwork. So let's put it this way: is there a human upper bound on teamwork? Well, I know in the case of basketball, I can compute the state of more than one player, and I probably can't compute over all 10 players, in real time. So there must be something in between. What's the number? I just want to know the number. We're going to use NBA to answer this question. They're probably operating near the peak of human performance because they're the best in the world. They practice constantly. They face huge incentives. And we know what good is from who wins. There's also lots of data. So I was able to get X, Y, and for the ball Z for all 10 players on the ball at 25 hertz for over 1,000 games. This is what the raw data looks like. This is a density plot of just the ball. You can see the baskets there in the 3-point line. Here's the side view of the court. You can see the ball through the air, learn physics. And this is a down court view. So we're going to use a method called maximum entropy to figure out, assuming that your next move is a function of the current state, all the positions of people on the court. I want to know the highest order interaction term in that function. I'm not necessarily going to learn I'm not so interested in the function itself, but I'll just pull out the highest order interaction term. That's a quick, easy proxy for the complexity of the reasoning that's occurring, the complexity of the information processing that's occurring. And what we're going to do is, with this method, we're going to compare the observed distribution of positions on the court to a null distribution, assuming that all players are acting independently, and get the difference. We'll compute the difference. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with a different null model that assumes that players can only interact in pairs, that they can only perform order 2 computations. Then we'll build a third model that assumes that the highest is order 3 and everything below it, order 3 plus order 2 plus order 1, then order 4 plus everything below it, and so on. And we'll keep computing the difference between the observed distribution and these null models until we can't tell the difference, until until we can't piece them apart. Here are the differences. As we increase the order of the null model, we get closer and closer to 0, as you'd expect. With the observed, turning the giant high-dimensional probability distribution cube, it's a discrete distribution, into an array, and then just plotting all the numbers along the x-axis for the observed distribution and the y-axis for these various models. As a model gets better and better and better, we'll see the lines line up along the diagonal, that the model probabilities will be equal to the observed probabilities. And you can see as we increase the order of the computation that we get closer and closer. This is work in progress, so there are no error bars over on this plot. Sorry, we'll get there. Nevertheless, we can say that we've put a lower bound on the informational upper bound on real-time teamwork, that NBA players are computing a function with an interaction term of at least order 4. I think that's kind of neat. What does it tell us? Let's see. This doesn't have to be live information processing. Plays, you can think of plays as a way of storing complex computations in memory. So really using as much as they can. All the tricks, in their body and brain and all the parts of the mind, all the capabilities that they can muster, they're able to reach at least order 4 according to our results. Okay, that's 2 projects down. Let's get through this third really different project. So humans have lived in multi-family groups for a long time, and they can be more effective the more they constrain and coordinate. But if pro-sociality is not enough for that, and maybe it is, I don't think it is. If pro-social, because we still have conflict in our lives, and we're not more genetically at least pro-social than before. So there must be something else. If pro-sociality is not enough to fully take advantage of all these constraints and coordination that benefit people, then rules and institutions must be pretty old in our lives. So we'll just ask at a high descriptive level, what rules do people impose on each other? And we're going to use that using Minecraft. Minecraft is a popular video game. A lot of people play it. It's owned by Microsoft. We're going to attend less to the game inside of it than to the infrastructure that exists around the game. This is the beautiful game, but we're going to gloss over it and pay more attention to how people interact on it and what's involved in getting people to interact successfully on it. So what's special about the game is that amateurs host instances of the world you just saw, and they're all different from each other. So you have hundreds of thousands of people competing for players, and each of them is customizing their world in their own way to solve, to some extent, the same problems. So they have to solicit in-game contributions, public good, to build exciting public goods. They have to compete for players, and they have to solicit real-world contributions, server time, CPU. They have to conserve finite CPU RAM and bandwidth in a resource-intensive game that gets more resource-intensive the more players you have. And of course they have to solve bad behavior. So these are all problems everyone's going to face, but there's a lot of flexibility in how you face those problems. These are all plugins that a person can opt into solving. They know they're going to face certain problems, but they get to choose what governance modules essentially and what combination of modules to install to solve them. This puts people who just thought they were playing a game and screwing around in a leadership role. Prior to being able to play the game, they have to solve a lot of resource problems to make the game playable with other people under all of these resource constraints. So with a very large data set, we're able to ask, what do admins learn to do? For over 4 categories, this is also work in progress. What you can see is that the blue bar is higher than the red bar, no error bars. So we just looked at the first month of a server and the 5th month of a server, and able to see in every category there's more rules over time. Separating out servers that in month 5 turned out to have been successful, we find more of everything. Successful server administrators started out with more rules, and it looks like they may have learned to add more rules over time. Now, but differences in governance style are not totally clear in terms of learning rate. So there's no causation here. It could be the other way around. It could be success causes rule installation or something. But nevertheless, there does seem to be an overall prior that fewer rules are necessary. And there seems to be, and one possible interpretation of the result is that more are necessary. The more experience you have governing a social system, the more you've done it. The alternative interpretation, yeah, I said it. So in 3 very different systems, we asked very different kinds of questions, all pretty different, both from each other and from the kinds of questions that we ask in cognitive science so often. But in every case, we're able to use really large data sets to gain insights into social reasoning and collective behavior. We gained information processing insights in both poker and basketball, and we start to ask questions about institutions and governance. and the individual's role in learning how to do all that. And with that, thank you very much.